Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for joining another one of our webinars here. Today we're going to talk about AP automation, and we're introducing invoice capture as well into our conversation, as well as there being other ways to automate your invoicing process. We're going to take a look at invoice capture, the Proactis module. If you have any questions, if you can just pop them in the chat, and then I can come to them at the end, if that's all right. Or if you prefer, you can just drop me an email after the session, and I can contact you directly. So invoice automation. Invoice automation or AP automation obviously sits on the right-hand side of this screen. Here we can see we've got our Proactis modules, or we call it our 6 pillars. These are the, excuse me, sorry, apologies, sorry, I just had to get some water. So AP automation is what we're going to be talking about today. So really how you can get the most efficiencies out of automating your invoice processing within Proactis or within the Proactis suite of modules. So AP automation isn't just a conversation by itself. You'll get the most benefits from AP automation when you take on board or you consider the other elements to the product. So obviously we can talk about P2P or purchase to pay or ordering or raising orders within the application. With AP automation, you will generally get the most benefit if you have orders being raised up front. If you've got orders raised up front, you've got visibility of what you're spending, you've got coding taking place up front, you've got approvals up front. So when your invoices arrive, however they arrive, and we will talk about how we can automate that process, when the invoices arrive, they're matched to the orders, the process is very much streamlined, and your suppliers are paid much quicker. It's a much more efficient process. Okay, you obviously do have the option to have invoices raised directly within the application. You don't necessarily have to have orders. Some organizations choose to have a bit of both. But again, we can still automate that process. Okay, so without the AP team having to manually go in, register documents, work out what the coding is, we can make that process much more efficient with the utilities and tools that are available to us across the platform. Okay, where you have obviously the additional modules, you've got supplier relationship management, your suppliers are onboarded, you know who you're working with, they've been vetted, they've been assessed, there's less risk with who you're working with. Obviously, again, that's going to speed up the whole automation process. That's going to speed up registering the invoices, knowing who you're working with, ensuring that the documents coming through are valid, the bank details have all been checked prior. Again, that's going to streamline that automation, that invoice process. If you're dealing with marketplace, for example, if you've got on-contract spend, you've got a negotiated agreement with one of your suppliers, and you're buying via a marketplace or a catalogue, again, you've got negotiated prices, you know what they are, you're less likely to get invoices in that don't agree to what you've raised the orders for. Again, reducing manual intervention and just streamlining that whole process. But what we're going to go through today, we're going to look at how you can reduce manual workflows within your AP team. Talk about best practices, efficiencies, improving compliance, how we can make a more, how we can create a more efficient experience for our AP team. We're going to look at the automation options available. So there are a few options available to you. It's not necessarily a one solution fits all. Depending on your supplier base, depending on how invoices are coming in, depending on the quality of the documents that you're receiving, depending on the number of invoices coming through from certain suppliers and the number of lines. There are lots of options available in relation to how you can automate your AP process. We're also going to look at what's coming within the product, or what's to follow, and how that can help you within your business. Just talk a bit about implementation. So with AP automation, we're looking to improve efficiency. Looking to reduce the manual effort involved in processing invoices within the product. So I mean, if you don't have any automation processes currently, then we're talking about your AP team logging in, looking at documents, uploading documents, manually putting invoice information in, then linking it to orders. Again, all of this manual, looking at the differences between the documents, trying to work out what they are. The AP team can utilize their skills more efficiently doing other things rather than just manually registering invoices, and we have the tools available to help with that. With invoice automation, it improves accuracy. With manual data entry and correction, there's obviously potentially room for errors. Again, where there's manual entry, we ideally need to look at reducing costs and time across our AP team. So again, utilizing their skills to more efficiently in other areas. With automation tools, we can enforce best practice. So we can adopt potentially a no PO, no pay policy if we need to. So we can really push back where you are an organisation and you do enforce the raising of orders up front, where invoices are coming through and the order isn't presented, the system can automatically identify those transactions and flag them for you. You can do it by supplier. It doesn't have to be a one policy fits all. You may have certain suppliers where you will have direct invoices with no PO. Again, the solution allows for that. Validation. Currently, without any automation processing, it's very difficult for your AP team to actually validate the documents, to actually expect them to check bank details on every single document that's coming through from a supplier, ensuring company registration numbers are correct, VAT registration numbers are correct, duplicate documents. So with the automation tools in place, it helps to detect fraud and just really flag where there are discrepancies based on your organisation's policies. Again, once documents start to be automated, you've got better visibility of what's going through. You can report on things that have failed and why they've failed. Again, to help make the process more efficient, you've then got the capability to go out to your supplier base, communicate with them, talk to them potentially about how they can improve their processes and bring documents through in a more efficient manner. What are the options available to you with AP automation? So e-invoicing. So if we're talking about marketplace, we touched on marketplace very briefly in the 6 pillars slide. So we have the capability to buy directly from suppliers' sites. If you've got a supplier and you've got contracts with them, fantastic, then you can go off and buy directly from their site. They make the items available to you. They make the prices available to you. You're not having to maintain that internally. You're not needing a resource in place to manage those catalogues. They're being held by the supplier. Once the orders are raised directly from their sites, they'll come into the system for approval and then go out electronically to the supplier. Once the supplier has fulfilled the goods or services, they can then send the invoice in electronically. So that's what we talk about when we talk about e-invoicing, is the invoices are coming directly into the application from the supplier's website. There's no intervention necessary in between. It's just a feed of data. That's e-invoicing. So that's one method of getting invoices in. And typically with our clients that use Marketplace, they would have e-ordering with that and also e-invoicing. PO Flip. PO Flip is another very effective way of getting invoices into Proactis. without the AP team having to manually register documents. So PO Flip can be utilised where you've got suppliers. So if you're using supplier relationship management, you've got the facility to onboard your suppliers, vet them, send them out questionnaires. They've got a portal that they can log into where they can see the communication that you are firing out to them, and they can respond accordingly. So as well as being able to respond to communication that's going out to them and questionnaires that are going out to them, they can also view orders that have been raised with them. So if you're raising orders with the supplier, they can see them within the portal. They've got the capability to take that order and flip it into an invoice. So to generate an invoice automatically off the back of the order that has been raised, that's visible to them in the portal. Once that's done, that will come directly into Proactis. So again, there's no manual intervention required. The AP team will see that invoice either in a tray or they'll see it match the order and go straight through into the finance system. There doesn't need to be any intervention. Imports. So a lot of our client base deal with imports from a spreadsheet potentially. If they've got suppliers that have invoices with hundreds and hundreds of lines, then typically one method of bringing those documents into the product is by using an import facility. So importing from a spreadsheet with lots of lines, either for a single supplier or for multiple suppliers, with the attachments as well. So it's not just limited to bringing in the invoice lines, it can also bring through the attachments. Again, no need for the AP team to manually register things. That can just be a feed. It can be a download from a supplier's site even, and then imported into Proactis potentially. ICAT. ICAT is the invoice capture solution that TSM has developed with a third party. We deploy this particular piece of software to our on-premise client base or our client base that's within the Touchstone cloud. It gives our clients the facility to have the tool available to automatically read and process invoices. Okay, so suppliers will send emails directly through to the tool, the utility where they're validated, read, and the information is stripped off of the document using AI and brought through into Proactis. Again, no reason for the AP team to actually manually register invoices. Invoice capture, which we're going to look at in more detail today. Invoice capture is the Proactis module. Okay, it's available to our client base who are on the Proactis cloud. Any clients that are looking to move to the Proactis cloud, we would be proposing invoice capture for them. So we're going to look at that module in a lot more detail today. It has lots of lovely features where suppliers can communicate directly. If an invoice comes in and it has a query, then that can be generated and sent back to the supplier where they have the capability to respond, and it would update the document directly. So invoice capture, automating the ATP processing of invoices. It will capture whichever utility you use for invoice capture. It will capture the documents, 100% of the documents from day one. If you choose to push all those supplier invoices through it, it reduces errors, there's faster invoice matching, better automation, better analysis of spend. Obviously, if you've got documents going through these utilities, then you've got the capability to report on them and analyze the information coming through. Where they're more accurate, where they're going through the utility and there's more accuracy, again, that allows for better analysis with more accurate data up front. All the validation is being done by the utilities, so there's less risk of fraud. Again, more accuracy. And with the data going through these utilities, obviously that improves the supplier relationship. Typically, where you're raising invoices manually, you're having to bring them into the business, process them, send them off, check them. The utilities will streamline that process. Okay. I'm just going to talk about ICAT first of all. So I'm going to look at ICAT initially, the TSM solution and the process. However, the process between ICAT and invoice capture and the way that documents are pushed through the solutions and end up in Proactis is very much similar. Okay, so this is branded ICAP, but it's the same principles with the invoice capture solutions. So documents are sent from a supplier, the emails or the PDFs are sent into the solution or to a particular email address where they are processed. There are options for managed services available to you with both options, with both ICAT and invoice capture. If you decide to go down that route, you don't have to have a managed service. But the key here is the AP team only need involvement if there's a query on the invoice. So they don't need to see it, they don't need to touch it. It's very, it's seamless. So the document will go directly from the supplier to a particular email address where the data is read, the data is validated on the invoice, and the only time the AP team need to be involved is for exceptions, perhaps the first time a supplier goes through the utility, or if there's an issue with the document. For example, it's a duplicate, or the bank details don't match, or you've got a no PO, no pay policy, and they haven't quoted an order number. At that point, the AP team can intervene and they can either generate a query, they can reject the document, they can push it through if they choose to. There are options available based on how it's configured. Once that's pushed through, or if it doesn't need intervention, it ends up in P2P. If it matches the purchase order, if the PO has been quoted, and where you do raise POs up front, that is where you are going to gain the most efficiencies from these utilities. Okay. If the PO is quoted and the invoice matches, it can go straight through into the finance system for payment. So there are no touch points necessary by the AP team at all. How do you get started? You can ask your suppliers to email the PDFs to an email address. If there are any paper invoices, they can be scanned and then forwarded, and you just wait for the invoices to arrive. So this is just an example of an email that would go through potentially with a PDF attachment and a supporting document via ICAT. The email format really is irrelevant. The data will be read from documents, irrespective of what the format is. It doesn't necessarily need to be a PDF with ICAT. It can be a Word document. PDFs are the most intelligent documents, and they will be read using AI. So that is the preferred option. However, in the event that a PDF isn't sent through, then the document can potentially be OCR'd, but it's not reliant on OCR. That's a backup. It doesn't use that in the first instance. It can support multiple invoices and credit notes in a single email. Additional documents attached to the email will also be processed and attached to the invoice within Proactis. So you'll have full visibility of any supporting documents they've added onto their email. Line level data can also be read. So with the use of ICAT, it doesn't necessarily just have to be the header information that's read from an invoice. It can actually retrieve the lines as well, and we can automatically code those up. In the event that invoices have failed, this is typically the troubleshooting window that the AP team would be working with. So this is where you would manage your queries, respond to the queries, deal with them, reject them if you need to, or push them through. Validation. So ICAT will validate. If it's a first-time supplier, it will validate. You can ignore the record or you can resubmit. Obviously, you want all your suppliers onboarded up front. You would only expect to be receiving invoices from suppliers that have previously been onboarded. You only want to be working with approved suppliers. Obviously, that's a bigger conversation to have. And that's where, SRM, supplier relationship management, can come into play there and really help you to understand your supplier base. If you have a duplicate document, you can ignore the record or you can push it through if you need to. If they've not provided a PO number and you've got a no PO, no pay policy, then you have the ability to, again, reject the document. Or if they just haven't quoted the order number, it can be added and resubmitted. And then you've got additional validation on bank details, company numbers, VAT numbers before the invoice goes through. So it will only go through query in the event that there is something wrong with it. However, otherwise it will go straight through into Proactis. Excuse me. There are audit reports available to you. So with the ICAT solution, you have reporting capabilities to analyse the data that's gone through the solution to better understand the types of documents that suppliers are sending you and the quality of those documents. Where you're registering direct invoices through the solution, typically it would read the header information, but it won't retrieve lines. Okay, so by default, the product won't retrieve lines. However, we can go a step further and have it retrieving lines. In the event that you've got direct invoices going through the solution without POs quoted, this is typically what you would see. And you would need to then select the item, or the AP team would need involvement from the AP team to select the item from the catalogue of items, enter the pricing information, code it up, and then submit that invoice through, where it would potentially go for approval. However, where line level information is read automatically, where that is an option, it will retrieve the information from the invoice, it will code it up for you based on the supplier that you've selected, and it will be pushed through for approval. ICAT reporting capabilities, there are dashboards available. You have the ability to look at documents successfully imported, how many required intervention out of those that were imported through the utility. You can look at your credits. You can also analyse your suppliers that were onboarded up front, or if you're dealing with suppliers that are sending you invoices that you haven't onboarded. So you have lots of options for analysing information. Invoice capture. So we just talked a bit about ICAT. So ICAT, again, just to clarify, ICAT is available for our client base that have an on-premise Proactis solution, or it's available within, or they have it within the Touchstone cloud. Where we have clients that are in the Proactis cloud, then invoice capture is the solution that will be most suitable for them. Obviously, these are conversations that we would have with you in more detail to establish the right approach for you. But invoice capture is the tool available. Again, it enables customers to receive and register clean, accurate information. PDFs are accepted. Paper documents are accepted. They can be scanned and pushed through the solution. Non-conforming invoices are highlighted. So if there are missing PO numbers and it expects a PO number, it will generate a query, or it will highlight that something needs to be done on that document. Okay, so it's dealing with exceptions. And it also gives you the capability to communicate back to your supplier so they can correct the information, and the burden doesn't sit with the AP team. The responsibility isn't sitting with the AP team. So where your suppliers may potentially call up chasing payment of an invoice, you have the ability to push it back to them, really, where you have potentially a no PO, no pay policy and they haven't quoted an order number. Again, it's a cloud-based solution, and it allows you to really automate that process of receiving invoices in without any manual registration at all. So it wouldn't be a case of, some invoices would be registered manually through the utility. All invoices should go through invoice capture to streamline that whole process. And how does it work? So invoices come in, whether they're paper, they're emailed, they're PDF, XML, they go through document capture. It will use machine learning. There are rules in the background as well. We can put rules around the suppliers or certain suppliers to identify how we want it to work with those supplier documents. It will extract the data. It will use OCR. It is using AI now as well. Okay, so it will look at the words invoice number, invoice date, and help to extract the information using the words and AI. And then it will validate. It will validate information that we tell it to validate. So we're in control of what we identify. So for example, for certain suppliers, we might highlight that they should always quote a PO number, and it will validate that information. It validates the dates, it validates the amounts, it validates duplicate documents. In the event that there's an issue, you have the option to send it through to Query Desk. If there's no issue at all, it will go straight through into Proactis and then into the finance system for payment. However, if there is an issue, it will go through to Query Desk, where you can communicate directly with your supplier. They can respond and update the document. It will update within Invoice Capture, and then you can push the document through, or the document can automatically push through into Proactis. So again, very, very little intervention required by the EP team at all, if any. And I'm just going to come out of this screen and I'm going to go into Invoice Capture. If you just bear with me. I'm going to reshare my screen. And oops, it's gone onto the wrong screen. Here we go. There we go. Okay, so I'm not in slides now. This is not slides anymore. We're actually looking at software. But this is Invoice Capture. Okay, so this is the Proactis cloud-hosted solution. So this engine allows you to really have full visibility of the invoices that are being pushed through from the supplier base. It allows you to know to view your suppliers that you're working with, suppliers that have exist, that have been approved, that you can register invoices against. It allows you to have visibility of the documents that have been received today or historically. It allows you to see what's in progress, what's been completed, what's been exported and gone through into Proactis, and really gives you the ability to manage your information and view your tasks or any tasks that are outstanding. Now, you potentially wouldn't give access to all options to all users, but I'm in as an admin, so I do have access to everything here. But you have graphical representations of the data as well. So you can clearly see how many documents came through the solution where the supplier didn't exist. How many duplicate invoices were there? How many documents came through where there was no order number provided, and there should have been. You can also have validation on invoice dates. So you can set your system to identify when an invoice is received with an invoice date prior to what you're allowed to process. So at some point there's a cutoff. And if you're receiving invoices with dates prior to that, it will stop and warn you and validate. Okay, so I'm just going to show you how that actually works within this utility. So if I just navigate to my batches, so documents come in batches into Invoice Capture. They can come in once a day or a couple of times a day, and depending on what's in the batch, it will just display them for you. Now you can filter, you can see the documents, all documents, or what's been processed, what's incomplete, and these are my batches. So within a batch, it might contain one document, it might contain more than one document. Okay, but you can see how many of them are complete, how many have been exported directly from this screen, and I can drill down into my document. There's one invoice there, and directly from here, I can see that there's data missing for this particular invoice that's been received. So if in the event that the invoice has come through from the supplier and there were no issues against it, there was no intervention required, it all validated correctly, it was an onboarded supplier, it would be exported straight away into Proactis, and it wouldn't come through into query here. Okay, and obviously once it goes through into Proactis, if it's matching to a PO and all the totals agree, it will be pushed directly through into the finance system. And again, there's no intervention required by your AP team, and that's the key, streamlining that whole process. Okay, however, this one has failed. And if I just go into it, we can see why it's failed. And I have made it fail on purpose. I've intentionally ensured that it will stop through the utility, so we've got something to work with today. On the right-hand side of the screen, I can see the data it's stripped off of the document automatically. So it knows its supplier, it's worked with this supplier previously, it knows where the data is being read from. It's automatically retrieved my invoice number, even though there's an alert against it. It's retrieved the date. There's an alert against the date as well. It's retrieved my total values for me as well from the document. I can see that there's a warning note that's assigned to this document. You can add notes, you can add alerts against the particular suppliers that pop up when this supplier's document is received. Please be aware that, and in this instance, sometimes they don't quote the PO number when it should be quoted. Okay, so you can have supplier specific alerts. And just as I scroll down on the document, I can see at the bottom, it shows me what's actually failed validation, what's wrong with the document, and allows me to make corrections if I need to, or I can send it to query, and that query can go out to the supplier for them to respond back onto this document with their response and the correct information. So if I want to ignore the invoice date, so I've got an alert in my system that tells me to stop and warn me if any invoice date are prior to a certain date. So this is obviously an old document, but I am going to, you do have the ability to overtype it, or you can allow the supplier to provide you with that information themselves. But I'm just going to ignore that for now. Okay. And what I have the ability to do is just send it through to a query, to query desk. So you can communicate with your teams. It requires intervention. So there's an alert on this document now. If I was to go back to the previous screen, it would tell me that there's obviously a query and it does require intervention. Now what I'm going to do is raise a query externally to go out to my supplier. So I can identify who it's going to. You've got options here. It doesn't have to go to the supplier necessarily, but I can choose to send it to the supplier. I can add additional email addresses. I can create templates. So based on the template I select, it can populate information for me so I don't have to complete it. Templates can populate subjects, they can populate text, they can populate fields that are necessary to be filled in by the supplier, but I'm just going to type it in manually. And we might say, for example, hi, the invoice is a duplicate and the date is incorrect. Okay. And the order number is missing. However, the key here and what we're doing here is we're pushing the responsibility back to the supplier. So it's not up to our AP team to sit there and start working out what the invoice number should be, what the date should be, you know, whether there's a PO number. If you've got a no PO, no pay policy, then push it back to the supplier, okay? And we can send that, and that will generate an email directly to the supplier and then allow them to respond with their comments, with the relevant information, and the document will be updated automatically. So if I just navigate out of this screen, just going to stop sharing for a moment. Bear with me. I'm having I'm having a slight technical issue here. Okay, so if I just reshare my screen, apologies for this, but I just want to show you an example of the email that will be received by the supplier. So they're going to receive a note directly from yourselves with any of the comments that you added. These templates can be modified. You can have default templates. You can change the text. You can change the links on them. But the important thing here is it gives the supplier the ability to respond directly to your query. They can click on the link. It will take them directly to that particular document. Let's just mark it as safe. There we go. It's taken me directly to the document that they need to deal with, and it's giving them the opportunity to provide you with the data that's necessary to complete this invoice, the invoice registration process, and push it through into Proactis without the AP team having to intervene. So the invoice number quoted, that was a duplicate, so they have the ability to suffix it or provide the correct invoice number. Let's just put something in there. Okay, the invoice date was incorrect, so I'm going to change the date. And the order number was missing. So again, they have the ability to provide you with that information, and they can enter comments. And they can submit. And once they submit, it will update the document automatically. So as I have my screen open still, and that supplier response has updated my invoice that's in query directly with the information, and the system will have saved that. So if I navigate back, it's also got the comments. Oh, here we go. Let me just get rid of that. I can see the note on the screen directly from the supplier. There's a full audit trail of all information captured, all communication. If I drill down and look at my document audit for this particular invoice that came through, I can see the information provided by the supplier. There were questions raised, when the response took place, and I can report on that if I need to as well. But the key here is the status of the document has changed. It's now been exported. So where the supplier has provided correct information that's gone through validation, it revalidates it. So if it was incorrect again, obviously it would stop. But where it's passed validation and updated the document, it's now been exported and will have been pushed through into Proactis. If I just navigate back to my batches and look at all documents, if I look at that invoice, it's now, instead of it having an alert, it's gone all the way through and it's been exported into Proactis. Now, again, where it matches to a PO number is where you're going to gain most efficiencies using the utilities, any automation tool, where you've got POs up front and all the coding has happened up front. The invoice just needs to match to the PO and it can be pushed through to Proactis and then obviously pass through into the finance system for payment. Okay, so that's the invoice capture tool. However, it is extending further than this. This is what it's doing at the moment. However, we have with enhancements. Let me just come out of this. Bear with me. Okay, so we've had a look at invoice capture, the Proactis, the actual Proactis module. Okay, but what's coming with invoice capture? Rego Kai is being introduced. It's coming very soon, and it will give you the ability to have predictive coding with machine learning. So where currently you have invoices that are coming through potentially that are direct invoices that don't have orders associated to them, that don't have any lines, that don't have any coding, the AI engine along with machine learning will present you with codes to use. based on historically correct information that's been pushed through the product. And that's for both orders and invoices. So where we encourage orders to be raised up front, obviously we understand that with orders being raised up front, there is an element for mistakes to be made. However, with Kai and the software providing you with predictions, accurate predictions based on what was raised historically, it will allow the user to adopt those predictions as codes rather than them having to just guess or type in codes and they're not sure how to code documents. And how can Invoice Capture and Kai improve your experience? So it's basically, again, as I said, faster, more accurate coding, less time needed by finance teams for fixing errors and recoding. So where you're being presented with the codes to use, it will lead to more accuracy, speed up the time taken to raise both orders and direct invoices. It leads to fewer mismatches because the codes are correct. Fewer mismatches, fewer issues with coding lead to faster payments to the supplier. Financial data is cleaner. Obviously, if you've got codes correct up front, then as they post through into the finance system, there's less need for manual corrections to take place, in which case your financial analysis is more accurate. Without the need to have teams in place to correct data manually, it allows for your teams to focus on more efficient tasks, like compliance, you know, and data analysis, rather than sitting there trying to recode invoices or recode transactions that have gone through incorrectly. There's much better visibility of spend. If you've got more accurate coding going through, then the spend visibility again is going to be more accurate. Your reports are more accurate. Your budgets will be more accurate as well. And with a more streamlined process in place, from ordering with predictive coding and AI through to invoices being processed automatically via the invoice capture solution, it will lead to improved supplier relationships. By having a more streamlined process from ordering all the way through to invoicing, the invoices will be paid quicker, again, allowing for a better relationship with your suppliers and a much more efficient AP function. So we've looked at invoice automation today. So if you'd like to have a more detailed conversation and a more detailed demo on invoice capture, then obviously please reach out and we can arrange those separately. If you'd like to talk about Kai in more detail, then again, as we have more information, we will provide you with that. And if you want to talk to us about that in more detail, then again, please reach out. I've got February on there. I've just noticed. Apologies for that. We are in March, but our next webinar will be running in a couple of weeks, and that will be on supplier management. However, they are subject to change occasionally. We're going to be looking at supplier relationship management, which we did talk a bit about today, and how to onboard suppliers, how to manage your supplier base, questionnaires, communication with your suppliers, and contract management as well. So if you have suppliers with contracts, how do you manage your contracts? You know, where are they? Do you even know what they are? So again, how to really maintain your contracts and your supplier base. Those webinars are coming. We are going to also talk about system audits. It's quite important to keep up to date and abreast with what's out there, the functionality that's available to you. It's not just a matter of patching systems, but also keeping up to date with what your business needs as your business grows. And audits are a great way of us helping you to do that. Segregation of duties. So we will be releasing a a recording on segregation of duties, really. And really, you know, we want to try and encourage our client base to adopt correct user roles and not use sysadmin. Obviously, we do have some clients that still use a sysadmin account, which is a very generic account that will fail audit. So it's quite important. We're also running drop-in sessions. Please join me. They were at 10 a.m., but they're moving to 10:30. So 10:30 to 11 a.m. every Friday. Please reach out for the link, or it's on our website, or it's on my LinkedIn. So please let us know. And if you have any questions, I don't believe we have any questions. Yeah, we can send the invites out. Somebody's asked for some invitations for sessions. Absolutely. All of these sessions, we will ensure that you are invited to all of them. If you can just drop us a note separately and just let us know all the people you wish to attend, or anyone you want to receive those notifications. If you can just drop us a note, and then we'll make sure that you are receiving them, as well as the drop-in sessions. So drop-in sessions are a great way to just ask a question or just come and listen in to what other clients are asking about, really. So yeah, just feel free to join us. Thank you very much for attending the session today, and I look forward to speaking to you soon.